in 3, 2, 1. The moment. To be given a moment. To take a moment. To grip the moment. The optimal grip on the moment. Building moments into momentum. Positive momentum, negative momentum. Downward spiral, upward spiral. The optimal grip on the moment. The optimal grip on the moment which allows one to take the moment in. To take the moment from the outer and bring it into the inner. The hand of the mind gripping delicately onto the moment, not too tight as not to break it, not too loosely as to let it go. Just the right amount to let it flow through one's fingers like a fine thread and guide it into oneself. And within, allow it to be metabolized. The metabolic process of the moment. The metabolic process of the potential within each moment. Neurosis. Kairos. Neurosis as the blocked process of metabolizing potential. Kairos as the ideal metabolism of the potential within each moment. Generating aristogenesis. The best generation. Freeing oneself from the blocks of one's pores, the pores of the membrane of one's mind that prevents the kairotic process, that prevents the perception of the potential and prevents the integration of the potential into the present moment. The inner metabolic process.
The art of metis springs into the moment and embraces the moment. The art of uncovering, the art of palliating, the art of recovering that which is at the root, which has been obscured, not obscured through a process of evil or malice, but through a necessary growth process where structures are experimented with and we are experimented upon in turn by them. As they say in ontological design, we design our tools and then our tools end up designing us. These feedback loops have gotten out of control, but was there ever the possibility of true control? The dynamic of gripping and grasping versus allowing is always a tricky one. And Metis is the art of threading the needle between allowing and grasping, the dynamic surfing of the waves of the moment, the knife's edge between control and being controlled, deception and being deceived. The universe wants to play, but it's not always just a playful puppy. Sometimes it's a tricky coyote or a wise raven or a spider that spins the web of words that is the world. Tantra comes into this too, if one speaks of weaving. The all-consuming embrace of the present moment in both its glory, its exaltation, as well as its tragedy and devastation. The tendency to filter, to selectively process, is ironically a blocker of metis, of the unfolding of the kairos of the moment and of the process of aristogenesis. In becoming in alignment with our desires and what is desired of us by the universe, we find that often changing our desires is far more in alignment with the universe than changing the universe. And yet this is not always serenity prayer shine throughout. And one cannot express fully in words the true art that is being pointed at by Metis.
Weaving the inner and outer closer and closer together, tighter and tighter together, until we form a golden tightrope upon which self can dance. Twang. The spider feels a vibration. Does it come closer? Or does it let it resonate? The self dances upon the present moment, maintaining its balance, maintaining equilibrium. Forgetting one's balance. Forgetting the invisible roots that reach down into the abyss, that hold us in place, that keep us stable upon the tightrope. The process of anamnesis, of remembering who one is, of remembering who we are. Cultural archaeology, digging up old technologies and psychotechnologies that can help rebalance the feedback psychosis into which we have entered. Psychosis was the buildup of momentum, expressing itself in the pathological unfurling of potential. Following a thread, a metic process, guiding oneself further and further away from kairos. but sometimes long loops have to be taken, and great knots have to be woven. Only that at the other side, when the string is pulled to its completion, once more it returns to the tightrope.
The tightrope is returned to, and everything is the same as when it started, and yet totally transformed. The shift that has happened, can one put a finger on it? Perhaps, and feel its pulse. Can one grasp it? Not quite. If one tries to, it might slip through the fingers. Such an interesting and paradoxical dynamic we find ourselves in as these sorts of creatures that both live in a world and contain worlds within our minds. Which one is the more real? Well, that's a question that itself might lead to madness. Psychosis, or perhaps the better kind, the root of all creativity and shockingly intense play. Anamnesis can be terrifying because what we've forgotten that we are when unremembered is so tremendous, so enormous that we tremble, we shake. It's too big to be contained within the limited conceptions of ourselves that we've slipped comfortably into like an old leather glove. The indivisible roots which bind us into and tie us down to the abyss are a form of grounding in the utter groundlessness. Groundless because the ground is fractally immense and forms a sky all of its own. Ability, it seems, to fully containing anything, yet we contain everything and are also contained by it. And this is not the sort of containment that involves bars or locks or keys, not a negative, not a positive. It simply is. It's an interrelationship that's spoken of at times in phrases like, as above, so below. This fractal resonance of the strange loopy container that contains itself, that contains the universe, that gives birth to all stories, is part of what it means to be a human, and I suspect any other sort of consciousness. There is something generative and magical, and dare one say divine, about the entire process, whereby you can look into the eye of any being and see within not simply a reflection of oneself, not simply a reflection of this world, but a multiplicity of worlds, of potentialities waiting to be born.
The terror of the totality. As above, so below. As overhead, so beneath. Inversion of the self. To fold the self inside out. To fold one's psyche onto the universe, to fold the universe onto the psyche. The potential that flows through the eye. One specific thread. The meeting of two eyes and the intertwining of the potentials, the left-hand potential and the right-hand potential. The different rhythms of potential. The potential of this moment, the potential of the next. Intertwining the two so that one is not only kairotically metabolizing the potential of this moment, but of the next moment, and the next moment, and the next moment, feeling into the flow, perceiving flows and not units, feeling the flow, knowing where the flow is going before the flow has gone. This is what Aristogenesis demands. It demands that one divines, that one can read the future, that one can see the future before it has happened. The necessity of anamnesis, to remember how the future was, so that we can better divine the future that will be.
The art of divination is linked to the strange loopiness of time as a construct which exists inside of mind as well as the waters in which mind swims. One of the most terrible and awful and awe-inspiring aspects of anamnesis is the plunging deep into the waters of eternal mind, where the ripples are fewer and much more intense. The underground rivers, the underwater rivers, the deep flows of this ocean carry us far away from the containers that we normally label ourselves. And yet, nothing real can be destroyed, and nothing that can be had can be lost. The grounding in the ground gives way to the grounding in groundlessness. How else might that be said? It might be spoken of as a flow, as a braiding of flows, a weaving together of flow processes. And these flows must not be happening over what is normally felt as time, because this weaving of them helps to define the perception of time. There is a magical art, sometimes called sorcery, which consists of embodying the edge between the past, the present, the future, in oneself, in a moment which is all moments, in a time which is all times. The dream time is an expression of this experience. From this place, all potentials are both real and unreal simultaneously, and all potentials can be accessed by a simple sliding motion of the mind. In this access is the key to uncovering the past, as well as weaving the future. And this key is deeply related to the inherent sameness or lack of separation between the past, the future, and this moment, which is itself simply a facet of all moments, a facet of a crystal which can be turned about both in the mind and without.
Capability of the mind to manipulate matter, to integrate matter, simulate it, rotate. symmetry, divide, add, subtract, fractalize, the mind swimming in water, swimming in the watery depths of the mind. Anamnesis, remembering one's deep biology. When one was a rodent in the times of the dinosaurs. When one was a fish still in the sea. When one was a bacteria. When one was unicellular. When one was barely alive. When one was a star. Containing all these levels of anamnesis. Navigating all these different environments that formed our psyche. The millions of years spent in water. The millions of years spent being terrified of dangerous lizards. To possess the world and to be possessed by the world. To claim one's stake. To claim one's territory. To seek groundfulness upon groundlessness. To carve out a corner of the world upon which one can sit and one can return to the groundless, and one can pause for long enough that one's mind can sink back down into its watery depths. Deeper still down into the core of the earth.
The mind as unifier of the elements. The mind as alchemical forge for the creation of new elements from the ones already known. The mind as the discoverer that all that is new and created by the mind also is ancient and discovered by the mind. The knife's edge, the non-duality between discovery and invention. A problem mathematicians know well, and that occasionally drives some of the best of them to madness. The kind of madness both creative and terrifying. The kind of madness which enables new technologies and new destructions. The kind of madness that consists of being lost in the depths of mind, having forgotten that the water even has a surface. The kind of madness that seems to have swallowed our world whole. So we swim now in the depths within the belly of the beast of madness, using the mathematics that have been discovered, invented, or simply found somewhere as guide stars, not realizing that by using these things, we change them and they change us. We navigate through a sort of celestial navigation, not realizing that the stars themselves respond to being looked at, just as we can remember being the stars. The stars also can remember being us. When one stares into the night sky, one finds the night sky staring back. A bit nicer than the abyss staring back, but no less powerful. And really, what is more abyssal than the night sky? The vast gulfs of interstellar distance, the lifeless gases, but wait, lifeless, there's a word. Where did that even come from? What sort of psychotic mind decided to label anything in this magical universe as lifeless? It seems better to label oneself as imaginationless, but even that is impossible. Perhaps it returns to the root of imagination, imago, the death mask. And what is so much of our civilization, our culture, speak into this world, but masks of our own death? What happens when we take off the mask?
The death mask, the only mask we cannot remove. The mask that sticks to the bone, that is bone itself. The line that separates life and death. The lifeline, the death line. The collective psychosis in which we found ourselves, swirling, a trance that has lost its dance, stuck static, blocked for so long that the energy, the potential seeps out in wild directions, concentrated into great rising pyramids, while fires go out all over the world. A pandemic that infuses every cell of our body. Every cell's sick and being deprived for so many generations. Now is the time to warp this trance from pandemic to pandemic. Total manifestation of the pluripotentiality of humanity. The cultivation of entelechy, of perceiving the perception within each moment. The loosening of the old bonds and the binding of the new. The unclogging of the pores. Collective kairos. Coming together in flows, building momentum into monuments. Monuments to the never-ending story. Monuments to this great planet. Monuments to the great sky above.
Perhaps the greatest monument so far built is the monument in which we are speaking, the monument with which we are speaking, the monument of language, the bridging of minds, the bridging of souls across great distances, both physical and spiritual. To reflect on the story of the Tower of Babel, that the languages were confused, that they might not reach the heavens. To notice, just as the globe is engulfed in a pandemic, it's also engulfed in some. The tongue may be of bits and bytes, but it's a carrier wave for other tongues, a meta language, a translation layer between all of the parts of humanity. A terrifying potentiality emerges from this, the noosphere, the global brain, the waking up of Gaia to herself, through us, with us, by us, and in us. Humanity taking its proper place as steward, not dominator. Perhaps we are the immune system of this planet. Perhaps there are interesting foreign particles floating around, and we must be activated and connected and in communication to repel or perhaps integrate this foreign matter. Perhaps this foreign matter exists, and perhaps it is, in fact, the philosopher's stone or an ingredient thereof. Perhaps the prima materia has been sent to us in various forms across various decades, years, centuries, millennia, and breaths. Perhaps when we breathe it in, this foreign matter into our bodies, we recognize that it is not foreign to us, despite the fact that it may seem foreign to the earth. Perhaps it is the cosmos re-enchanting itself. Perhaps by breathing it in, we are transformed, and by breathing it out, we transform. As was said by a great master of the glass speed game, in the alternation between inhale and exhale, between heaven and earth, between yin and yang, holiness is forever being created. And perhaps this process continues apace and has never, in fact, stopped. Perhaps the universe cannot stop breathing. Perhaps the dichotomy between life and death is one created by our perceptions, in our minds. And perhaps the universal mind sees this as the transition from one dream to another. Will the transition be smooth or sticky? Will the transition be sharp or flowy?
Sticky dreams. Dreams that stick to you as you wake up, like dust in your eyes. You can't shake off. Stay with you for a whole day, for a whole month, for a whole year. Breath is the fundamental play of life. Fundamental play of the universe. The universe holds its breath, exhales deeply, feels into the nothingness at the bottom, rejoices in the filling, the replenishing. The monument of language, formed of a billion tongues, the metabolic monuments that keep the past alive. Humanity as the socio-neocortex of the Gaian mind, just waiting to be interconnected horizontally and vertically, returning to its plant roots, weaving into the fabric of the ecosystem of its brethren animals, both outer and inner. And activating the biodigital mind of Gaia. Laying the infrastructure that the metastructure of spaceship Earth, the self-sovereignty of Gaia, can be born. The lick of a tongue, the spark.
Humanity seems a bit like the prefrontal cortex of the Gaian mind, like the part of the mind that thinks of itself as the whole being, as the mover, the doer, the controller. But just as with our minds, one wonders, is this really where the magic is? Or is this simply where the magic is noticed? The humanocentric bias, the chauvinism of humanism. There are minds, it seems, that are far older than our Gaia's mind already. And the pressure humanity may feel to boot up the global consciousness, to create the noosphere, may be self-imposed, artificial, and misleading. Perhaps the biosphere is already awake. Perhaps Gaia already thinks, decides, dreams. Perhaps we are not the leading and bleeding edge. Perhaps we are the slow children. Perhaps the plants and the fungi have been inviting us into higher consciousness for millennia. And we've heard the call yet dimly. Few of us have taken up the offer. And now the call becomes more insistent, not because Gaia needs our protection or our contribution, but because we need hers. Because without that waking up into the mind, we will have slept so long that we will have forgotten to breathe, forgotten to eat, forgotten to drink, forgotten the holy and sacred interchange of our parts with the other parts that make up the whole. Perhaps we are the psychotics in the insane ward of Spaceship Earth. Perhaps the ship is humming along just fine. Perhaps we're not the captain. Perhaps locked away for our own protection, not the protection of others. Perhaps all we need to do is wake up to the situation, notice our own imposition on ourselves, and by doing so, be welcomed into the arms, into the mind, into the loving embrace of a community of spirits that are peers in diversity, all aristocratic, all the best, and all unique in their own way. And perhaps this already has happened, and we simply need to unforget it.
Gaia as a gentle mother, trying to softly awaken its child, becoming more and more insistent over time, trying to wake it from a bad dream. Wake up, wake up. Give attention. Open your eyes, all of them, and give attention. Don't worry. I'm still here. I never left. Just like a child when the mother leaves the room. Forgets that she was ever there. Enters into that state of terror. The mother holds the territory. And within the territory, we can reconnect with the groundlessness. Upon the territory, we can connect with the ground. And upon the ground, we can connect with the groundlessness. or neuromachia, the war of dreams. Dreaming or being dreamt, stuck in somebody else's dream. To be put asleep. To never truly awaken. To never be awake long enough for the momentum of attention to build.
Building the momentum of attention in a condition of oineromachia requires oineromancy. It requires a bit of sorcery, a bit of non-ordinary perception. Ordinary perception has been defined by humanity as wakefulness. This is strange. The quality of ordinary perception is the quality of the trance which has lost the dance, which has forgotten even the possibility of dancing. Dancing is a window into ecstasis, standing beside oneself. Standing beside oneself, we notice all the others standing beside us, all of the many arms and manifestations of Mother Gaia, gently caressing, comforting, soothing, as well as prodding into wakefulness. The strange dichotomy of care and pressure, pressure and care. It is thought that ease consists in a lack of pressure. But a baby will not develop proper muscles for breathing unless crying also happens. Sometimes growth is painful, and embracing this is difficult. Suffering, however, is not identical with pain. Suffering is what Gaia tries to wake us from. Pain is manifestations of the world. Suffering is imposed on oneself pathologically. Suffering is a bad dream, a limited dream, a dream that one has forgotten how to dream and must be dreamed. A dream of a world unchanging, an imposition by the mind through an act of black oineromancy of a static universe. Stasis is death. Growth is life, is the universe, is a process. Waking from the dream consists of embracing the momentum of life, feeling into even the most static moments where the universe seems to be still, noticing the deeper rhythms of the cycle, feeling that the breath is still continuing. There's just been a pause at the out breath.